Hey everybody, this is Trevor Petty in my week 3 discussion on preaching and weddings. And yes, I have preached a wedding sermon, or I've officiated several weddings, I think around 10, maybe not quite. Most of those have been students or graduates from our campus ministry, though there have been a couple that I can think of that were through personal relationships or folks outside of our specific ministry. In my church tradition, I wouldn't say that there's a whole lot guiding weddings. Other than that, I come from a fairly low church tradition, and so weddings don't necessarily happen at churches, and our churches don't usually have even a church membership, and so some of those issues around membership don't apply as much. However, a lot of the ministries I know do have some sort of framework that they approach that question of, will I do a wedding for somebody? And a lot of those ministers, I think, are doing a good job of embracing a kind of evangelistic opportunity to connect with folks and speak into their lives. Usually, though, it's guided by folks that are a part of their church community. And so if it's someone outside of the church, again, that tends to be more of a personal response. And I'd say through my experiences, more and more, I'd say I'm pretty hesitant about doing it with folks that aren't a Christian. I had a couple that wasn't Christians, but knew I was a minister, and we talked about that. And they were still, kind of vaguely higher power in their thinking. And so it was enough so that I was okay stepping into that role in their lives as a way of sort of fostering that relationship. But yeah, I don't know if I would do that same one again. And so I think the other thing I've come around to is actually just the requirement that if someone invites me to do a wedding, that they're required to do premarital counseling. That's just part of the deal if they want me to do it. And so if someone had someone else they're doing it with, I think that would be fine, but that's just part of the deal with me. So how does the gospel relate to the institution of marriage? I think the first thing is actually, I really don't like that word, institution. I think it's impersonal. I understand what it's saying and doing. I just don't like it. And so when it comes to how the gospel relates to marriage, I see the broader framework of God's being relational, and some of the language that we see of God's covenanting with Israel, or Christ and his bride, the church. And so I think that it works really well to introduce that framework of God seeking after us, pursuing us, inviting us into a covenant relationship, which is a death and resurrection as we develop a new identity in Christ, with Christ, in this union. And I think that's a beautiful portrayal, beautiful framework to approach marriage. And it's just naturally a way to speak the gospel. I think inviting the couple into that death and resurrection of forgiveness and being shaped in that relationship in holiness to resemble more and more God's goodness and shalom in the world. I think all of that kind of breathes out and has potential in a wedding sermon. When it comes to essentials of a gospel-centered marriage sermon, I don't know if I would use. I think the things that I just said work really well, but I don't know that I would feel too hampered by using a particular lingo. But yeah, I think virtually every wedding I've done in some way is closing with some of that language about how marriage is a kind of reflection of this relationship, or has the potential to reflect this relationship that God has with humanity. And so again, for me, that's just very natural. Is there anything I've witnessed that I object to, or that was contrary to the gospel? I've definitely been to some odd, I think for me, things that are really traditional are just odd, almost because they just seem too impersonal or disconnected from a couple. I think I've also been to some where it just felt like the sermon was taking over. And yes, it was a wedding, but it was I don't know. It was almost, I think in that sense of it was a worship service and then there happened to be a wedding kind of thing. And it was just really odd to me. I understand that traditions do that. I just think that the ceremony can be its own ceremony, and it is worshipful and can be kind of guided into that. But I don't know that those were contrary to the gospel. I think that was just sort of a matter of my own thinking, where maybe in some ways that came up in the discussions today. I guess I do feel some inclination to sort of get out of the way, not meaning that I wouldn't make the most of the opportunity, but that I like to keep it simpler and kind of short and sweet, just as a way of I'm going to connect those dots, but for the most part, the things that I'm sowing in the lives of that couple are what's happening in premarital counseling. And so I'm not too worried about some grandiose sermon or really trying to milk every minute or more and more time out of that space. And so I do see it as a kind of opportunity to connect more relationally with people in that community, and an open door to speak some things from the gospel or introduce the gospel from that framework of the wedding. And so so I think for me it'd be more of the fit of trying to keep it personal, trying to keep it simple, and in a way that connects to the community well, without sort of like dominating the wedding with the sermon. That's the only thing that I can think of anyway. But yeah, well, thanks, and I look forward to your all's feedback.